All right. Welcome, everyone, to episode 11 of America's Voices, where we're bringing Americans together from across the political spectrum to go
There's a
underneath
little bit
the
of a
headlines.
delay.
Oh, that's okay. That's normal. To go underneath the headlines, to talk about what truly matters to us today. Now more than ever, it's time for some grassroots conversation. We're going to change up the format a little bit today. We're going to go around, say our name, our political affiliation, and since so much is always happening at once in our country, and we have totally two different parallel echo chambers telling us what we should care about, we're going to, narrow it down to what we care about and what matters to us and why, from a human perspective, not a political perspective. I also want to address, if you guys were with us last week on episode 10, things got a little heated last week, but we are all on the same page again, with the intention that although we all may not always agree, we still can like and respect each other and not make things personal. This is just my own way of contributing, of being a part of the solution. It's not always going to be perfect, but at least I'm doing something, and everyone who's here is also doing something as well. We want to attract open-minded and free-thinking individuals to have an honest conversation, because we truly are stronger united than divided. Okay, so let's get to it. My name, by the way, in case you don't know, is Daniella Bloom. I'm LA's premier relationship authority and have now turned my attention to our country today, because the same reasons why relationships are falling apart is very similar to why our country is struggling right now. So we're going to get into it from a psychotherapist perspective. So let's go. So let's introduce one of our veterans to the show, Mark, who's our resident libertarian Republican. And we also have a dog joining us. I hope he's also a patriot. Mark, let us know who you are briefly, and then what has gotten your attention this week.
Wow, there's so much this week that's gotten my attention. My name is Mark Lipp. I am a registered Republican / libertarian. This week has been an interesting week. Because my doctorate is in business ethics, it's been very interesting for me to see what these companies are doing in regards to the Georgia voting rights. Second would be Joe Biden on his Second Amendment executive orders and what he wants Congress to do. I think there's no particular ranking of what I'm thinking about either. The other is the Georgia election laws.
Why do you care about these issues? Why are they so important to you specifically?
Because they set a general trend for the rest of the country. It also has a tendency to separate us more instead of uniting us together. And that's something, when Joe Biden came to office, he was going to unite us, and he has not done anywhere near what he should be doing. The infrastructure bill, I find that, yes, we need infrastructure, but the bill is full of stuff that is really unnecessary and not infrastructure. This week has been an interesting week. And I think most importantly is the fact that have our politicians lost sight of who they work for and what they're supposed to be doing, as opposed to working for themselves. And with that, I will let somebody else speak.
So that is what's really ailing you this week, that they forgot that we are the people, and there's a disconnect. That's what you're feeling. Okay, thank you, and welcome to the call. David.
I'm a Democrat, and I think honestly, there's not an issue that's bothering me this week. I mean, all the ones that Mark mentioned are on the top of my mind. But to me, the thing that's driving me batty is the clinging to talking points. We're clinging to ridiculous arguments. We're taking an extreme view on every item when there's a lot more nuance and a lot more underlying conditions as far as every element. So when people say it's all this way or it's all that way, there's a lot more gray in the world than a black and white response to just about any issue. Yet people go to the extremes to make their points, and it's at a tipping point for me.
I actually agree with everything you said. Is there a specific issue where you wish the nuance was more covered?
You could take a look at the voting laws. You could it's pretty much everywhere. I mean, every issue you'll see crazy memes and information of make the ridiculous argument after ridiculous argument where construed facts were things out of context to make the point, when the reality is there's plenty to debate on the real policy and the real facts.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you for being here. And did you say what your political affiliation was?
Mhm.
You did. Okay. I don't like you saying that. Okay. Joel, welcome back to the call.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, so my name is Joel Patrick. I would say my political affiliation is I voted Republican the last election, but I don't consider myself to be a Republican. I would say that my views are center-leaning right. If I were to bring up the things that are on my mind, I would say on a national level, I'm basically waiting for things to go out of control. I'm waiting for cities to start burning down just like they did last year, because I'm anticipating a lot of bad things coming out of the Chauvin trial, the George Floyd trial. I feel like things aren't going to go the way a lot of people think they're going to go. And also in the last week, there was another police shooting that is pretty controversial. And I'm waiting for that to go a certain way. And the reason why I'm waiting is because as you know, I do videography. I have a YouTube channel called Project America. So as soon as things start going left, I'm just going to grab my camera, get out there on the street, and I'm going to start recording. On a local level, I mentioned that, is that we have a situation here in Burbank, California, where a business has been shut down, family-owned restaurant, been around for about 70 years. And while all these other large businesses and restaurants and corporations were allowed to open, this guy wasn't allowed to, but decided that, you know what, I'm going to open my doors anyway. And as a result of that, he's being shut down. Now that everything else is open, this place, which is a landmark, is being shut down. They've put a fence around it. They're planning to bulldoze this building. And right now, that's become the hot spot in the valley here, is you've got people trying to save this business. And I think it's a shame that small businesses suffer while these gigantic corporations and large chains, they're allowed to open. And it doesn't seem fair to me. And it seems to me that these politicians have forgotten who they're working for.
Yeah. So even if you're doing everything right, it doesn't seem that the rules are fair to everyone, especially small businesses. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that and being here. Mr. Daniel, welcome back to the call.
Thank
Yes. I'm Daniel Greenberg. I am a Democrat, very liberal Democrat. My concerns are always about civil rights, and most recently, the civil rights affiliated or associated with policing and how policing has gotten out of control. And we need to do something about it.
Okay. And our special guest this evening, Mr. Joshua Washington. I had the pleasure of meeting his wife, not knowing it was his wife, several years ago in Virginia. I heard her speak. She is so passionate. It's amazing how we come from completely different worlds, but we share so many of the same values. And then I got to hear Josh speak at a protest against critical race theory. And we've been in touch ever since. And now you're available for the call. So please tell us a little bit about who you are and what has caught your attention this week. And it can be anything.
Thanks, Daniella. Yeah, my name is Joshua Washington. I am kind of similar to Joel. I'm kind of right-leaning center. I'm usually mostly registered independent. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of things on my mind, and I just wrote a piece a few days ago, and that's still been on my mind, and that's just been the emotional manipulation of my community of Black Americans by people who claim to champion our cause. So when it comes to, I specifically wrote about Black Lives Matter, the organization, because the founders and the leaders their net worths are, in the millions now, and the main founder just purchased her 4th house, and this was like coming right off the heels of BLM being in hot water from the local chapters for amassing all this money and not really going anywhere productive, not going to the chapters, not going to the families of the children that were murdered, and it's been heartbreaking. I think it's a pattern that I think I've just in my limited knowledge of the the world and historical events. It's a pattern that's not new, but it's just to experience it now personally and to actually see it happening in real time is it's pretty heart-wrenching when if I actually sit down for a moment and just kind of think about what's going on. So yeah, that's been on my mind recently.
Well, I will pay attention to that word, heart-wrenching. I certainly want to hear more about that. Thank you so much for being here. What I will share, I was center-left for much of my life, and I've recently become center-right. What has stood out to me is in the recent shooting of Daunte Wright, which if anyone saw the video, the police officer made a tragic mistake and is going to be accountable. But the way the media is displaying this, it just seems like it's continuing to amplify the problems and leaving a lot of facts out, like that Daunte had an arrest warrant, he was resisting arrest, and no one is debating that it shouldn't have happened. I mean, the officer needs to be accountable, but I guess as a mother and as a therapist, it's like no one can make make accidents anymore and mistakes without it being so much bigger. I know that the medical profession has 250,000 accidental deaths a year, but no one is protesting against boycotting doctors and doing away with how the medical profession is run. And, there's a lot that we can stand up against as Americans together without it being about this idea of oppression and systemic racism. So if it's okay with you guys, since we have 2 amazing Black Americans who are center-right leaning, who are not the biggest fans of BLM and how things are portrayed. And I don't want to assume things here, but I'm assuming that David and Daniel, you are in support of BLM and the idea of systemic racism. I think it would be interesting. We have a little bit of a juxtaposition here to hear why Joel and Josh are not the biggest fans of BLM and what is going on today. What do you guys think?
I think that's a great idea.
And Josh, I think you took a cheap shot there in your opening moment about, I forget the name. What's the name of the BLM woman who bought the house?
Patrice Cullors.
Patrice Cullors. There's a lot of news and there's been a lot of articles about how she just bought 4 houses and spent $1 million, or 1.4 million on a place in Topanga. There's no proof whatsoever. And please enlighten me. I did research on this today that any BLM money went to that. She just signed a multi-year deal with Warner Brothers Television. She's a faculty director at a college. She has a best-selling book. And so I mean, I look at that going, she's done good and she bought a house, more power to her. I think it's a stretch to say that this came from BLM monies that was funneled to give to her money. I have no issue with saying, hey, BLM money in the organization should be looked at and where that money's going to make sure it's done right. But to make that accusation that she's profiting beyond any level, we're doing something, I don't find any basis in fact for that.
Okay, well, before I let Josh respond, I just want to make it clear. I don't think it's helpful to label anything people are saying as cheap or strong or good. It's just a contribution. And if that's an important point, and if you want to debate that more, David, you certainly can, but don't minimize it because there might be something that you don't know.
That's why I said that if there's more to it, please tell me.
But don't lead with the cheap shot if you don't know everything, right? Like,
no, but
be open to more information.
Look,
I did say that with doing a lot of research. So if there's something
Okay.
I don't know, please
Well,
tell me.
and
But
I want to hear Josh's response,
Let-
but one more thing I want to add to that, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, but the records of Black Lives Matter are opaque. They're not open to the public. We don't have transparency with where the money has gone.
I 100% agreed. But on that same
why don't we
level,
let Joshua tell us,
right.
since he is an expert in the area and he's biggest thing, and he's a guest tonight, let him start the conversation. And from there, and Danielle is right. There's no cheap shots. There's nothing. It's information that we're going to transfer between each other. And hopefully we all get educated.
That's right.
So when I say what I said about her and about Black Lives Matter, it's not coming from some, when they first hit the scene in a big way in 2014, I didn't have an opinion either way. So I just wanted to see where things would go with them, where they would lead things. And so first of all, the first few things, or I should say positions, big positions that they've taken as an organization were positions that did not resonate with the majority of the Black community. One of those things was early on, they talked about getting rid of charter schools and getting rid of charter schools and basically their view was that charter schools were oppressive to people of color and they, poor quality, whatever their arguments were. The statistics don't actually support that when it comes to the Black community. Their biggest position, which was to defund the police, which was a big thing last year, was not supported by over 80% of the Black community, especially those who actually live in those dangerous areas where crime is high and murder is high as well. Most Black people didn't support, even though they might say that they like what Black Lives Matter might stand for, when they were polled on whether or not they think they should have more of a police presence or less, or the same. Most of them either said the same or more. And so, but moving to what I was saying about her, yes, it is true that BLM has not and still haven't been transparent about their funds, the money that's been coming into them. And that has been decried, not necessarily by, it's been decried more from the BLM local chapters than it has been from the public. And it's also been decried by the parents of those children who are no longer here. That, okay, I see that there's $1 million coming in. What is it? Nothing's going to our community, that's coming to us. There are people, there's a man by the name of Darren Seals, who's not alive anymore. He was murdered. No one knows how. But he was very vocal on social media. He actually was from Ferguson, Missouri. And he actually confronted a BLM protest that was happening in Ferguson. And then he took to Facebook and Twitter to say basically that most of these people aren't even from here, that they came here, made all this noise, caused all this destruction, and now they're gone. And I'm here. I've been here my whole life working in this community. Where are they? And they came, they collected their money and they left. So with all of these accusations and things being thrown at them from within the Black community, it's a little suspect that not only would they not be transparent about it, and they still aren't, that then Patrice turns around and buys herself a $1.4 million house. Now, and I think this is the I think the argument that's being framed that's not necessarily fully relevant, which is that did those monies directly come from BLM? Well, one of the things that we do know is that she started a consulting company that now consults the organization that she founded, that pays her to consult them. And two, yes, she does have a book out. She has signed deals, but still, there's still that issue of you have gotten where you've gotten on the platforms that you've stood on based on these tragedies that have happened to these kids. And not only is no one seeing the money, but you seem to be doing very well for yourself while you're not telling us where the other money is going. And this again, I say, is not a new thing. And so when I look at that and I see that there's no transparency, there's no response to the calls of being transparent, and then there is this, the people on top seem to still continue to rise up. It begs some serious questions. I don't think it's a cheap shot at all to say that, yeah, whether the funds came directly from BLM or not, the leaders at the top are using their own community to get ahead. It's called grifting, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
I got a question for you. When I read a bunch of your articles this afternoon, so and they're good. My question for you is, the BLM movement really rose in a state of chaos. I mean, once again, it was a slogan before it was an organization, and even the organization's incredibly splintered. I mean, I remember last year as people were giving money, the will to give money was strong, but half the money went to organizations that weren't necessarily BLM or had BLM in their name, were a chapter, were this. So, I mean, I think, what can you tell us about the structure of BLM and how much of it is multifaceted opposed to just one set organization with chapters?
So when I try to be very particular when I talk about BLM, and especially in this context, I'm talking about the organization that was founded by the three women. There are all kinds of different chapters or movements that aren't necessarily connected to the organization. And I've written about the ones that were connected, and the leaders, the professors and other community leaders that were a part of those chapters. So yeah, I do recognize that there are a lot of other or little splinters that have BLM or have the name in it. But my concern is the one that actually has the unified message, like I said, of defunding the police, that was the biggest one, of like I said, getting rid of charter schools. I wrote a few months ago, I wrote an article just kind of listing some of their biggest platforms and comparing that to the general Black American public, in that most Black Americans would say that they support BLM in theory, but if you extracted the name from the platforms and gave them the platforms, they'd say, no, we don't want to do that.
How much is the funding going to that main organization opposed to the others? Is it incredibly one-sided? Are they getting 90%? Are they 40%? How much funding's going to them opposed to the other groups?
No one knows because there's no transparency.
No, there is transparency on that because it's all charitable contributions. So it'd be listed how much money each one has.
According to the chapters, like, they're not getting hardly anything from,
right.
I'm talking about the chapters who are connected to the organization. According to those chapters, that's why the DC chapter came out with a statement, and a couple others, that, hey, like, you guys have, like, we know that millions of dollars has been coming in. What's going on with us? Like, we're doing things in our community, and where's this money going? Like, you keep telling people that it's going to help fight systemic racism and police brutality, but like, it's not. We're actually doing that on the ground over here, and it's not coming to us. So like that according to the chapters, they're not getting anything.
Joshua, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that BLM, the way it's structured today,
Mm-hmm.
increases systemic racism in the United States or decreases it?
Do I think it increases or decreases it? I don't know if I would say I would put it in terms of increasing or decreasing it. I don't think that BLM does. I don't think that they do any substantive work to decrease it, if that's what their goal is. I can't say that they are actively increasing it, but I would say that, like I said, that the positions that they take are not one. It gives the impression that is that's all that we talk about in the Black community, which it's just not. But then two, you know, we don't even all agree on what the most daunting issues are in our community and how they need to be fixed. And when it just comes to my opinion, I think that there are a few other things that really need our attention at a much higher level than what BLM tends to focus on.
Can you
So
say,
yeah, I just don't think it makes that big of a, I don't think it makes that much of a dent other than just kind of creating a big spectacle.
can you share what those things are?
In my opinion, you mean the
Yes.
things that we fix?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, well, I can't even say first and foremost because I think all these could be first and foremost, but one is education, and in that I think that the fact that there is a growing number of Black families that are deciding to either homeschool their kids, put their kids in charter schools or some sort of alternative schooling. You know, I think that there needs to be more resources. And when I say resources, I don't mean government resources. I mean like resources, whether that's from each other or whatever, poured into actually ensuring that, you know, in California right now is the worst. 75% of Black boys can't read at grade level. There, you know, and you know, we talk a lot about the school to prison pipeline, but the school part of it doesn't usually get addressed. You know, which is like, okay, there's something wrong with our schools, and kind of changing the conversation around that. You don't have to put your child in a public school if that public school in your area is struggling. There are other options, and you know, so issue of education is one. I mean, I think that's our key out.
Is everybody locked up?
Mhm.
Say again?
It locked up on you, Joshua. I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Did I freeze on some people?
No, I see you fine.
I think it was Mark.
It might be Mark. Mark
Might be me.
locked up for a second.
Might be me. Well, there is a growing number, Joshua, of Republicans who want to homeschool, especially California. They want to pull their kids out of public schools because they don't like what they're teaching, the way they're teaching it, and the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there's, you know, Charles Barkley said it the other day on TV. I don't know if everybody heard it. 80% of Black people are good. 80% of white people are good. And the politicians are what making us all hate each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
If we all got together and fixed the school education system, whether it's charter schools or public schools, I think that just goes beyond Republican, Democrat, Black, white, anything. It goes to the value of what we want our children to be when they grow up.
I agree. And actually, I mean, I agree with you 100%. The reason why I highlight that the Black families is because, so I was homeschooled, right? My parents homeschooled us from K through, I went to high school my last 2 years of high school, then I went on to college. And, you know, when they did it back in the 90s, it wasn't popular for Black families to do that. And so I mean, we had other Black families that would do it, and we had other like Black community. We grew up in a Black community, but when it came to schooling, you know, it was a lot of white Republican families, which we had no problem with, but a lot of my parents' peers, a lot of their Black peers, made fun of them. They looked down on them. They said, well, are you trying to be white? Are you trying to be you think you're better than us? And so there was like this negative connotation with homeschooling your children because that's something that white people did. And, you know, it didn't come from the outside. It came from within our own community. It was something that they had to kind of just push past all that stuff. And because they felt like that was the best thing for us. I wasn't a very good student. And my mom early on saw that if I had gone to a public school, I may have been deemed the stupid kid and put in the slow classes. Like she saw that I was gifted, but I just wasn't good at school. And I didn't really get good at school until a bit later, until I was a little bit older. And so, you know, those are decisions that they made. But unfortunately, many of their peers labeled that as a white thing. And so what I mean by a growing number, it's really awesome for me to see a lot more families. My parents and I used to run a music school when we were in California. And the number of Black families who homeschooled their kids that came into that school was, I was like, wow, I remember being the only one, you know, and I remember kind of our family kind of being the odd one out, but it seems like there's actually a community now that's growing. And not to say that public schools, but I mean, I went to public school too, and the public school I went to was great, but but school choice, I think, is a huge discussion that needs to be had in the Black community that often gets when it comes to I guess whether it's, I mean, not the news, but it just gets overshadowed by the same old stuff. You know, we're talking about something like, again, even when we're talking about police brutality, you know, I do believe that you know, that if we talk about, if we go on a case by case basis, there are some cases where I would say, yeah, I think that cop acted was racist, and there are some cases I go, I really don't see that at all. But statistically, it's not plaguing us like these other things are, and we just don't give attention to those other things like we do this.
Can I
jump in for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was gonna just ask.
So I just want to back up to your original question. You wanted to know why we weren't supportive of Black Lives Matter. So for me, when I look at Black Lives Matter, I don't see how they're doing anything to actually help the Black community. I can see how they're doing things to highlight an issue. They're highlighting an issue, making a big deal. I don't want to say making a big deal, but I would say that they're good at sensationalizing an issue that happens with police brutality. But I just don't see what they're doing to specifically help the Black community. And then for me, a big thing is family. I think one of the biggest problems that we have in the Black community is family. And when you look at what they're all about, it seems like the policies that they're suggesting are hurtful to the traditional family structure. They took down some of the wording that they had, but they highlight how that they advocated women, how they advocated trans, all these different groups, but they left out Black men. They never said anything in their statement about how they support Black men. And I just found that kind of ironic, especially when you consider the fact that it's Black men that we're seeing on the street that are being shot by police. So you would think that that would be the thing at the forefront, unless we're just assuming that that's in there. They had a statement on their website where they were basically saying that I forgot exactly how it's worded, but I'm sure Josh, you will know. They talked about how they basically want to deconstruct the traditional Western prescribed family. And to me, this is the number one problem that is facing the Black community today: father absence and lack of a family structure. If you could fix this aspect of the Black community, the community as a whole would be transformed. So I don't see it as a pro-Black movement. I see it as, I see a lot of anger. Under all of it, I just don't see it as a pro-Black movement. I see it as a Marxist organization whose goal is to basically deconstruct the country. They want to tear down this system to supposedly set up another system, but what would that system be that they eventually want to set up? Because in my opinion, this country, for all of its flaws, has a lot of good things about it. So that's why I don't support Black Lives Matter. I just don't see how it actually helps the Black community.
The founder or the lady, I forgot her name, she proclaims she's a Marxist. Mm-hmm. She makes no bones about it. She says, I believe in Marxism. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think the comment that was on their website was they wanted to deconstruct the nuclear family. When I read it, and that's gone. That wording is gone.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to interject too. First of all, thank you for everyone contributing.
Yeah, they took that statement down because it took them a few months, but they figured out that statement does not resonate with the Black community, and it doesn't resonate with most people in general. So I think as a PR move, they had to take that statement off their website.
Yeah. There is something disingenuous about the organization, especially when we see time and time again that certain Black lives matter, but not others. And there's silence on Black crime and the nuclear family. but I wanted to go back to something that Joshua said, because
Okay.
I think education, when you know more, education is a form of power. And if children cannot read, dumbing down a system for them to get into doesn't help them either. But it's also not just the schools, right? Because there has to be a value at home. Your mother was aware enough that you needed more to learn better. And I feel like it's all connected, just like what Joel was saying. When you have a more of a nuclear family, you have more of an opportunity to put priorities into your children and into education. And I know I'm a white Jewish person saying this, but I know I'm in a safe space here, and that's why we need to be able to ask in safe spaces. But do you guys feel that it's kind of like what Candace Owen said, when you're growing up with, your biggest role models are these rap stars singing about, cop killing and baby mamas, and not promoting proportionately the value of hard work and education? Do you think that has made its impact?
I think that's an overgeneralization on your part.
Well, I'm asking the question. That's why we're having a conversation.
I'll let you answer first, Josh.
So I do think it is an issue, but for me, and I would agree with Joel that actually my number one thing would be family. And that even though, this was talked about in some circles before, about how Malcolm X even said it with all his views that I don't necessarily agree with, but some I do. And one of the things that he did say was that, and this was back in the 60s, that the Black American community, he was like, we seem to be the only community that looks to celebrities and athletes and things like that for like for substantive, like to speak on substantive issues, and not that they're stupid. I mean, I'm a musician, I'm a performer. When I'm not doing this, there's nothing wrong with being, out there on stage. But what he was saying was that we tend to not look to, like, there are a lot of, it seems to me like minds like Thomas Sowell are starting to kind of resurface. He's been doing what he's been doing for decades. And there's still so many of us in the Black community who are only just now finding out about him. He's been largely kind of dismissed for all the things that he's done, for all of the debates that he's had and interviews that he's held, and all the things that all the books that he's written and lectures that he's given. And I think that even though, yes, there does seem to be this, elevation of people who people who don't know much about what they're speaking about. I'll say it like that. Even though there is that, I still think that it is on the family. It is on, I mean, I have two boys. We talked about that earlier. And that, I feel that weight even now more than ever before, that, okay, even if the whole world has this specific messaging, if my boys grow up to live a lifestyle that's less than what they should be living, that's on me. That's on me as their dad. That's not on BET or MTV or whatever's on YouTube or what they've been seeing, because I still, as their father, can shape them and grow them. So I do think that it doesn't help when that's the messaging that we tend to see a lot of. But I still think that it's on us we can actually affect and change our own culture by how we raise our kids and how we decide to change what's important to us. So
Right.
I hope that answers you.
Yeah.
And I think that's important what you just said. You said that if your kids don't grow up with the values that you've tried to instill in them, that's on you. And that's a true statement. Unfortunately, most Black children don't grow up with a father. I don't know how many Black people I've met that have told me that they've never even met their father.
Right.
Like this is a problem that I would say affects it's unique to the Black community.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, I do meet other people that haven't met their father, whether they be white, Black, Hispanic, whatever. But I'm telling you that this is a problem that we have had, that I have noticed over and over again. And I've seen it more within our community than I've seen in any other group of people. Now, so I think it's, I like the fact that you are willing to take responsibility for that. However, when you don't have that family structure to give you your values, then what Black kids have a tendency to do is they look to culture to give them their values. And this is a problem that we've had. And I don't want to blame culture because I believe in self-responsibility. However, this is a problem. They look to Beyonce, Jay-Z, hip hop. They want to emulate that. And yeah, so that definitely is an issue, and those aren't exactly the best role models.
I'm gonna tell you a bit of a story, and Joshua, you'll probably relate to this. I was a professional musician in my first career. I had hair back then, but I was a professional musician. I lived in Greenwich Village. And when it comes to music, we don't see colors of people. And we don't see anything except, can you play or can't you play? Okay. But having grown up in a mixed neighborhood, I come from the South Bronx. I went to public school for up until 8th grade. And then my parents shipped us off in white flight out of New York City to the suburbs of New Jersey. And I moved back to New York City. I hated it so much as soon as I went to college at NYU. My favorite life coach is Ayanna Van Zandt. Anybody familiar with Ayanna Van Zandt?
Of course.
She has tackled the problem of multiple children by Black men not being with any particular woman, and says it is the destruction of the Black community and needs to be addressed. Yeah. And she is phenomenal. If you've never seen her, so I think you guys are on point when you say the destruction of our society in the Black society comes from basically a destruction of the nuclear family, because we don't get to pass on what we learn to our children, what you learn to your children. White, Black, Chinese, Asian, it doesn't matter. If you can't get those values to your children, and if you're showing them the value, it's okay to have multiple kids with multiple women, you're not going to break that pattern. It's up to the men in society to break that pattern, not the women.
Sure. And when the men are not there, children are looking for a sense of belonging, and they're vulnerable to what is around them. And it's not always the best choices. Daniel, do you have any questions or any comments for the group tonight?
I'm a little concerned with the whole role model thing, that overgeneralization, that there aren't good role models within the Black community that they can look to.
That's not what I said. I'm saying with the absence of fathers, many children don't have direct role models to emulate. So of course, there's wonderful role models in the community. I have 2 of them right here in my panel.
My role model was my father.
Yeah.
My role model was my father. That was the person I looked up to. If anyone were to ever ask me who is my hero, my dad, without a question. And it's unfortunate that whether you're Black, white, whatever, a lot of kids don't have that. But I think that what Mark said is very important, is that it's the men. The men, it's not to discount women, but we play an important role. And I think role models are important.
It becomes imbalanced if there's an absence. It becomes imbalanced.
I think James Baldwin said it best when he said, children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they're great at imitating them. Mm-hmm. The pattern continues.
I want to go back to the BLM organization just for a second, because I just see a small conflict that I want to clear, is that there's a kind of a dichotomy of, we don't know where they're spending the money, but we also don't like what they say they're going to spend the money on. So my question is, for the charter movement, or changing families, or these things, have they put money to those? Because we're saying that we don't know where they put money or what they've done. So is part of the frustration with them as their platform that they're not implementing, or is it that the money that's not going? I mean, it would sound like, hey, if we don't like where they're going, it's best that they blow the money other places, because we wouldn't want to see it go to what they're what they said they're doing because you're against that. So that's just a little bit of my confusion on that, if that makes sense. I don't know if I said that clearly enough.
The money is not getting to where it needs to go.
Well, but that's Josh. I mean, where it needs to go is up to debate. But what they're saying, what their platform is, sounds like they're not even funding what their platform is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how both of those things can conflict. I mean, I don't agree with their platforms, but the even if I did agree with all their platforms, this lack of transparency in funds is an issue. So whether it was, whether they, their whole lineup was everything that Joel and I talked about, but then local chapters were saying, yeah, but we're not getting anything. We'd be saying the same thing. Okay, well, they're just using people for donations. And it doesn't mean, I guess, too, that I don't think it's an all or nothing kind of thing either. I mean, we can see money going into the certain demonstrations they have or things that they organize or whatever. I mean, I'm sure there's money that goes into the events that they hold, but that still doesn't account for the millions that they have received that no one's seen. I mean, yeah. So I mean, even I don't think those things conflict. I think it's like they have this very Marxist view of America, and they have this, we got to get rid of the nuclear family and defund the police and all that stuff, and which I think is very destructive. And then there's also the issue, like, internally of they say that they are for the downtrodden and for the oppressed Black Americans, yet the families of these children haven't seen a dime, and the local chapters that they started.
Right. No, I mean, Josh, I totally get the argument that, hey, they're a scam organization, their platform and what they spend isn't going to it, and they're raising great money, and nobody knows where the money goes, and it could be siphoned, it could be going wherever. My point was that I know there's a lot of things in their platform, but I don't see how they're spending any money, certainly according to you, that's pushing their platform. To me, they're just words on a piece of paper, because if they're not putting money into those things, they're kind of irrelevant. I mean, it's kind of it's just a PR page.
Well, how much money are they actually raising?
I think they raised 60 or 90 million last year.
I saw 90 million somewhere.
Okay.
I mean, in February, they did release where some of the money went. They were a little bit more transparent. I just saw in the LA Times, but I don't think, I haven't taken a good look. But my point is, I just don't know how much. We know their agenda, and you guys are against the agenda. I totally get that. But if they're not funding their agenda, it doesn't matter. I mean, yes, it could be all a scam. Don't get me wrong, and that's an issue. But to me, those are two different things. One being a scam, and the other putting money where you don't want it to go.
Well, one of the things that we do know that their money is going toward is putting certain curriculums that
Democratic candidates.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So whether it's California, I mean, this is across the country, and Daniella talked about it, critical race theory, but not just critical race theory, but very specific teachings that they hold in their policies that are in public school, whether de facto, so it's not mandated by the departments of education across the country, but it's there are things that teachers teach as supplemental education to their students, which is one of the reasons why I went to California to join the protest, because that it is now becoming law that kids have to take certain courses to graduate. So they are putting money behind these other things that will continue to shift the culture in schools with children. I mean, so that is a thing. I think, I don't think that they should be ignored just because they don't seem to be putting all of their 60 or however $90 million to what they're saying they want to do, because they are making some impact. As far as changing or trying to change opinion on certain issues. But yeah, I still don't see those things as conflicting though, because while they're doing that, they're scamming people. I mean, so I think those two things can exist at the same time, and it's damaging for us. It's damaging. Yeah, it's just not a good thing that's happening.
So because I am so big on giving platforms to free thinkers who go against the mainstream media narrative, Joel and Josh, if you guys had an opportunity to speak to America, what would you want them to know? Like what do you feel, oh shoot, that they're talking about what David was saying about the nuance? What would you like what would you like to have come across, and where does the light really need to be shined? I think we touched upon it a little bit, but I just want to give you an opportunity to just, like you were saying, speak from the heart at what you wish America really got and understood right now.
You can go first if you want to, Joel.
Got or understood about what?
About what's going on today, what you really want people to know, and as a Black person in America, where you think the problems truly lie.
Yeah, I mean, it's real simple for me. I would just want people to realize that I just feel like Black anger is being utilized to divide the country. We're being used as pawns, and I don't think that we're getting anything out of it in the end. We're used every 4 years before an election, and nothing happens to change the Black community. I sincerely wish somebody would put forth something that would have just a sincere, direct impact on the Black community in a positive way. I haven't seen that. Now, having said that, I'm even conflicted about saying that, because ultimately I feel like we have to do something, but I guess you can have policies that would help. And I just feel like the policies that they do adopt, that Democrats tend to adopt for the Black community, are just, I don't know of any that are actually working. I mean, that's a big, that's a loaded question that you put forth there, but I just feel like we're being used, Black anger is being used to divide the country right now. So I just wish that people could see that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really honest and real. And this is where the attention can be more focused on. What about you, Josh?
So I agree with what David said in the very beginning about nuance. And I would say for those who, it's interesting, and social media is not the barometer in terms of what the world thinks. Only a small percentage of the world is on social media. So I understand that, but it was interesting to me because when I first shared my thoughts on Patrisse Cullors and her house, the most of the people who shared it, not from my personal profile page, but I have another public page, a fan page. Most of the people who shared it were other Black people who either were like, wow, this is shocking to me. But most of them were saying, I knew it from the beginning. I've been trying to tell you guys this. And I noticed that, because I'm just curious as to kind of, like I said, social media is just a small picture, but the people who were arguing against them were usually not Black people. And I thought that was interesting. And for me, I guess my message would be to, for anyone who genuinely is concerned about my community, to not to just watch what's happening on CNN or just watch what's going on Twitter or Facebook, but to literally to visit, to go to barbershops, to visit Black churches, to actually, like, if you have friends who are Black, like going in their spaces, because you really will find that our ideas and our opinions are just as diverse as this country is, and it's sometimes, even for me, I get the impression that most of my community thinks this, you know, and I seem to be the only one who doesn't agree until I go get my hair cut. Like seriously, or until I, or Sunday happens, I go to church, and then it kind of reminds me that, oh yeah, no, we all kind of, this is a conversation that's continually being had between us, that's being portrayed as one thing, or if it is two things, it's like two very opposing things, and everyone hates each other and everyone's screaming at each other. It's just not the case. So yeah, my message would be to go to those spaces, talk, listen, ask questions, whatever. I think a lot of people will be surprised.
And can I say one thing real quick? And I'm saying this for the group as a whole, right? So there's this thing that liberals do, or leftists do, where they want to push, you know, Black and brown voices forward, and that the disenfranchised voices get to speak. I don't want to do that here. I want everybody to speak. It doesn't have to just be me,
just Josh and Joel tonight.
You know what I mean? I want to hear David's opinion. I want to hear Mark's opinion. Daniel, I want to hear your opinion for a change. You know?
Oh, I was going to bring Mark. You'll know the old joke. Josh just reminded me of it. Of what is it? If there's two Jews on an island, there's three synagogues.
Say it one more time.
Rabbi, 6 opinions.
3 opinions.
Yes.
Right. A synagogue, because they wouldn't get right. The third one, nobody would go to.
Exactly.
Right. Right.
Everybody finally starts speaking and my audio goes crazy. So yeah.
Yeah.
It goes back to what Charles Barkley said. 80% of the people on both sides are good, black, white, brown, whatever.
Yeah.
And there are some people on both sides who are crazy.
I will say, for Josh in the education, I met Barkley around 12 years ago, and 2 kids walked into the room and he said, "Hey, you guys in school?" And they said yes. And he just looked at them and goes, "Good. The world doesn't need more stupid people."
I love that.
That's great.
I love that.
That's what we need.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think we are so much more beautiful when we celebrate our diversities. And that's why it made me really sad to start seeing a movement about cultural appropriation, that's becoming a negative thing, like wanting to listen and eat and wear hair a certain way. I feel like it's a way to connect and say, I think this is beautiful. I value this in you. I want to learn more. And, you know, I feel like we were coming so far in our last few decades with, you know, my favorite shows growing up, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Family Matters, Cosby Show, where I could see, I didn't see a Black family. I saw a family that shared similar values to mine. I feel like that's had a strain on it in the recent times, and that makes me sad.
Joshua, I think what you said was really important, that you go out to the churches and you go out to the places and learn about people. I was fortunate because I had a very famous baseball player from the Dodgers on my staff for 25 years. He was also my roommate on the road, a gentleman by the name of Maury Wills, who was a shortstop from the Dodgers.
Okay.
And he grew up at a time when there was segregation, and there was a time when he couldn't stay in the same hotels, even though he was a Major League Baseball player. And being with him 25 years, and he was my best friend. I learned about things that I would never have experienced growing up, ever. And you really get a true understanding of what it's like to be somebody else by talking to them, by listening to them, by just having a conversation, not about politics, about their family, how they grew up.
Right. Can I share something? I know it's late for us East Coasters. But just real quick, if I can, something that my grandmother told to my dad when he was younger, and my dad shared, he often shared with us, is that exact thing. You know, when the issue of segregation versus integration was at its height, you know, when it came to schools specifically, back when my grandmother was younger, she was a kid. She told my dad, and he told us that, you know, there were often many heated debates that were had, lively debates, between Black people in the basement of churches and all that stuff about whether or not this would actually be good for the Black community. Now, I'm not saying segregation is a good thing, but what I am saying is that one of the things that the people who were concerned about integration was that integration would really mean that all the Black kids would go to the white schools, and that our institutions would be torn down, and our teachers would be fired, and our staff wouldn't have a job anymore. Which is actually exactly what happened. Which is that they didn't even bulldoze the schools, but there's still schools that are up now. My grandmother went to Scipio A. Jones High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I think it just got torn down maybe a couple of years ago. But I think that anyone who wasn't a part of those conversations might think that, well, of course Black people want segregation to end fully, full stop, no nuance, no nothing there. And whereas I think pretty much everyone could agree that segregation was not a good thing, the discussions that were being had around integration, I think, was important. And I think it's something, again, like that some of that nuance is lost now, which is, even if we agree on the basis of something, there's a lot of nuance around it.
Well, I was going to say, Joshua, it goes back to the BLM. I think when even you said the concept's right, the execution is wrong. And that you could put that into segregation or integration on a lot of things, that a statement and the execution are two completely different. The intention and the execution don't necessarily work hand in hand, which is where things go wrong.
Right. Absolutely.
How do you guys feel about separate ceremonies based on color and having Black safe spaces where segregation is being asked to return? How do you guys feel about that?
Well, it's not just Black safe spaces. It seems like
everyone's
they're doing this for a lot of different groups now, where you're having you're having the gay transgender thing, or the Armenian this and the Mexican that. They're separating everything now. Yeah. And this is the thing that gets to me. And I probably mentioned this here on my show before, is that my family, my mother and my father, came from the South at the tail end of Jim Crow. And they came from a generation that fought to be included. So when I see that these different groups are doing things to separate themselves, to me, it feels like you are, what's the word I'm looking for? You're going backwards, you're regressing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, my parents came from a generation where they fought to be included. And I feel like it's a smack in the face to their generation to want to have these things that are separate. Now I can understand, initially, I think I probably would have understand that you feel like you want something that's pro-Black, where you can feel special or whatever. But I just think that it does more to divide us than to bring us together. And I'm all about the unity. I don't think that we need to have things separate. So that's my opinion on that.
Here, I'll go back. I mean, I'll kind of give the Jewish story that I'll speak for a lot of the Jews that came over. I'll say in the 10s, 20s, or 30s, or whatever. I mean, grant you my time period will be wrong. Most of that came over were Orthodox Jews, were Orthodox in their community, because there wasn't the variations we have now. As they moved to America, most of the next generation really abandoned their Judaism, and there was an incredible amount of assimilation. And it was really the third generation that became more Jewish than their parents. And I think that's kind of going back to Joel, what you were saying. I think it's kind of a pendulum shift where one's a reaction and then one's the counter reaction. That it just kind of goes through that cycle of going all the way one way, going too far, and then going back 70 degrees and then shifting back to the middle again. And I think what you're seeing is just that assimilation, total assimilation, and you're missing some of that root. So you want to get back to the roots, or back to what gave you distinctiveness, or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I definitely do think that that does exist. I just feel like in a public institution or even a private institution, I don't think that that should be an issue. I could understand within your own personal community, right? Let's say you come from a group and you feel like we as a community we've drifted too far away. We've drifted too far one direction. There might be the natural need or feeling that we should come back, but within your community, the college environment is it's a public space, so I don't, and that includes everybody. So I don't feel like it should be an issue there, but you did make a good point. That does happen.
Here's my biggest fear: the law of unintended consequences. When we were growing up, my generation, I'm probably just a couple of years older than everybody on this call, we were taught not to see color, not to see race, not to see anything like that. We were taught to try to be blind to it. Now we're being told to not only be not blind to it, to be so aware of it and be where it becomes a segregated society. What are the unintended consequences of that happening? The things we haven't thought of. Are we going back to where we were in the 30s and 40s? There may not be Jim Crow laws out there, but are we going to turn people into racists? It's my biggest fear.
Sad.
And we've come such a long way. Yeah, we're not perfect. I don't know when we get perfect as a country, as human beings. Human beings are flawed to begin with. But we've come such a long way. Yes, we need to go farther. But is this the methodology by which we need to go farther with? Is that going to bring us to the next level, or is that going to bring us backwards? I don't know the answer to that. It's just something I've been thinking about since this whole thing started.
Joshua, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think about it more in terms of just ideas than there's a racial element to it, but I think that especially because I think we're mostly talking about college campuses, and I'm talking about that too. College is where you learn, obviously, but where your ideas are supposed to be challenged. You meet with students from different backgrounds, you talk to professors, you either change your position or you're more resolute in some positions. I think, and so when it comes to not just having safe spaces, but I think this culture that comes with it, which is, you're not allowed to speak on this issue because you're not X, you're not Black, you're not a woman, you're not, you're not gay, you're not Russian, you're not, whatever it is. So you can't even talk. Like, so then
Nor can you act now. You can't act either if you're not.
You can't act, you can't do anything. And it's like, okay, but what if I'm just trying to learn and grow? Like, I don't know much about you, or I'm looking at this from my point of view, and I actually may have something correct, valid to share. I mean, David and I were talking about Black Lives Matter. I didn't go, hey David, you're not Black, so you need to shut up. Like, but that's what's happening. It's like, I'm not even going to acknowledge what you're saying because you don't belong to my group. And I think that fostering and allowing a culture of that kind of separation to continue to happen will just fuel more of that. I mean, in a relationship, friendship, marriage, I mean, when my wife and I are arguing, it makes it worse when we, if we separate from each other or don't talk to each other, because then if we haven't resolved things, and at least for me, I'm like going through stuff in my head, I'm making things worse than they need to be, rather than, okay, but so this is where I'm coming from. This is why I did this. And now we have an understanding. Well, we know each other better now. I think that we're doing the opposite. We're doing the, with what happened in Ferguson, I know right after that, I think it was the it was Mizzou. So I think
it was Mizzou or University of Washington.
Yes. And other college campuses, there was this, it was so counterproductive. It was, we want to make a space where only Black people can talk, white people you can come, but you can't say anything. And for me, I said, I just, it turned into like this perpetual, like, we're going to kind of dump on our white students that are there. And I don't think it really, not, I don't think, it didn't really do anything, it didn't really do anything to help anything. Like what was that? Like, I didn't understand that.
I got to run, but I was going to bring up one point just to tie this back to last week. One of the topics we had was affirmative action, and we talked about college admissions for a brief second. And my daughter, who's going to be applying for college in a year or so, has been looking at colleges, and she was going through her list, and she said, "Hey, I'm taking that one off my list. I'm not where." She took a college off her list, and I said, "Why?" She's like, "They're not diverse." It was 97% white, we're 98% white. She's like, "I don't want to go there." And so just want to bring that back as far as safe space and getting challenged and meeting diversity and seeing that, and how that last week, it would just to bring that back together, and how we make those situations happen where we are able to celebrate diversity and challenge ourselves and create that.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up the call, but I just like to say that if people were watching this and didn't know what was going on in our country, they would look and see that there's a lot of agreement on this.
I got to run, guys.
Today. And this is what I want to see more of. The nuance, the real conversations, the real stories, the real experiences from people who actually have been there and have a perspective that might not be the popular, clickbait narrative, but is still even more valid nonetheless. So I really want to thank each of you for coming tonight. Daniel, is there anything, you were quiet again tonight. I know you like to listen, but since you have two amazing speakers here on their firsthand experience of being Black in America, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask them directly?
No, I'm still lost on this whole safe space thing. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, in case you're not aware, but there has been a movement now to have safe spaces on college campuses and college ceremonies that are divided by race and ethnicity. It feels like we're going backwards. And that's what we were talking about, getting people's opinions on that. So
what is that? You keep saying safe spaces, but you're not defining what you're talking about.
Okay. Did someone else want to define it more clearly?
Well, the safe spaces, it goes beyond what you just said. They, on some campuses, they literally have safe spaces where if, let's say you're in a college course and the professor says something that you don't like or you're uncomfortable with, you can retreat to a safe space and, get yourself together, go, pet a puppy, whatever you need to do to get yourself back together again. So, I mean, it's exactly what, I think the name speaks for itself. It's a safe space where you don't have to be affected by anyone's opinion or the world or learning in general. Because learning can be
an abstract concept, or is this a physical manifestation of?
This is a physical manifestation that is happening in the world at a college near you.
That's right. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for coming. I also want to thank, we have some really active listeners tonight. If you guys want to check out all their amazing comments, we've heard from Sharon, Lee, Taji, Mariel, Arlen, and let's just keep the conversation going. You guys can feel free to respond to their comments directly in our America's Voices Be Part of the Conversation public group on Facebook. And if you too want to be a part of a future episode, if there is a subject close to your heart that you want to contribute to and share that nuance with, we would love to have you. In the meantime, God bless you all and God bless America.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Daniella.
All right.
Joshua, thanks for coming tonight. Joel,
Yeah, nice to meet you, Josh.
Always a pleasure.
Mark.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Mark.
Nice
Mark,
to see you,
Daniel.
sir, as always.